So kita akan mula untuk sesi kita pada pagi ini. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, selamat pagi, very good morning to everyone. So tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian, pertama-tamanya saya mewakili pihak MQA dan juga panel yang terlibat dengan sesi webinar pada pagi ini, mengucapkan kesyukuran dan atas keizinan untuk sama-sama menyertai tuan-tuan dan puan-puan pada pagi yang berbahagia ini. Dan seperti biasa pada kesempatan ini saya terlebih dahulu akan mengucapkanlah terima kasih kepada pembentang pada hari ini sebab kalau tidak ada pembentang kita pada pagi ini maka majlis kita tidak mungkin akan dapat diadakan. Jadi seperti yang kita dah wawarkan, pembentang kita yang pertama adalah Prof. Mahdia Dr. Andy Liu Tekoy, Pro Vice Chancellor daripada HEP University yang juga merupakan pengerusi panel pembangun garis panduan amalan baik Apel.Q. Jadi pada kesempatan ini kita akan berbicara secara langsung dengan pengerusi yang terlibat membangunkan guideline to good practice Apel.Q ini. Jadi sebarang kemuskilan, sebarang perkara yang tidak jelas kita akan discuss pada pagi ini. Dan yang kedua yang berbahagia Dr. Eddie Siong Choi daripada FAA juga merupakan seorang panel pakar yang terlibat membangunkan GGP Apel.Q. Saya juga mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih dan sangat berbesar hati di atas kehadiran yang begitu ramai pada pagi ini sebab kalau kita buat secara fizikal di Dewan MQA pun kita tak akan dapat cecah jumlah seperti ini. Jadi dengan adanya platform Zoom secara webinar ini sebenarnya kita dapat secara masif penyertaan daripada semua stakeholders kita. Ini merupakan satu perkembangan yang baik walaupun kita dalam masa 3 hari dan mesej MQA untuk menyebarluaskan pembelajaran sepanjang hayat untuk menyokong untuk menyokonglah pembelajaran sepanjang hayat yang merupakan agenda penting negara kita dapat kita laksanakan. Okey, next slide. Okey, saya dah perkenalkan ini. Kalau ikut agenda kita akan bermula sebentar lagi. Lepas itu kita akan ada sesi Q&A pada pukul 11. Okey, next. Okey, sebagai urustia kami ingin memaklumkan bahawa ketika webinar sedang berlangsung, para peserta boleh mengajukan soalan melalui ruangan Q&A dan kita ada nyatakan di mana di ruangan Q&A tersebut dan boleh dinyatakan di situlah. Soalan akan kita bacakan pada akhir sesi nanti. Sekiranya ada yang ingin bertanya terus pun kita akan benarkan, boleh raise hand dan urustia akan memberi laluan kepada tuan-tuan dan puan untuk mengutarakan persoalan. Okay, next slide. Okay, yang ini seperti yang kita sudah sedia maklum bahawa perkeliling MQA bilangan 5 pada tahun 2020 bertarikh 24 Disember tahun lalu kita telah mengeluarkan perkeliling berkenaan dengan garis panduan amalan baik Apel.Q bagi tujuan penganugerahan kelayakan akademik Apel.Q, dan kita dah menyatakan tujuan kenapa GGP ini dibangunkan dan juga apa aspek-aspek utama yang terkandung di dalamnya, dan PPT boleh merujuklah kepada dokumen ini yang tersedia di website MQA. Okay, next. Okey, ini panelis kita yang kita dah kenal. Yang pertama Associate Professor Dr. Andy yang selalu selamba dan ramah menyapa kita dan juga Dr. Eddie yang selalu tersenyum gembira anytime selalu tersenyum saja untuk kita, dan dia merupakan satu aura yang bagus untuk kita pada pagi ini. Dan sebelum saya menyerahkan sesi webinar kepada panel jemputan, izinkan saya untuk memperkenalkan panel kita, walaupun panel kita ni sudah sangat terkenal ya, tapi sebagai mengingati kembali jasa-jasa beliau, saya akan membacakan sedikit mengenai biodata beliau. Yang pertama, Prof. Madya Dr. Andy Liu, Associate Professor, merupakan Pro Chancellor di University Health. Beliau pernah memegang jawatan pentadbiran kanan di pelbagai institusi pendidikan tinggi konvensional dan terbuka di Malaysia. Beliau merupakan salah seorang pioneer ya, pelopor ataupun pengasas dalam mewujudkan dua IPT di Malaysia ya, AUCMS ya, Alliance University College of Medical Sciences dan juga wawasan Open University. Dan minat dan pengkhususan beliau sangat luas ya, cover a broad spectrum ya, meliputi bidang jaminan kualiti dalam pendidikan tinggi, perancangan strategik universiti, pengajaran dan pembelajaran dalam talian OER ya, Open Educational Resources, akreditasi, pengalaman pembelajaran terdahulu, Apel ya, ini memang bidang kepakaran beliau, serta ada beliau juga minat sebenarnya dalam bidang sains ya, terlibat dengan bidang pembiakan dan pengklonan tanaman ya, cloning of plants. Beliau merupakan pakar rujuk ya, dan juga dilantik sebagai ahli panel MQA ya. Dan Dr. Andy telah bekerjasama rapat dengan MQA untuk melahirkan keluarga besar Apel. Apa dia keluarga besar Apel? Ada Apel.A, ada Apel.C dan yang terkini ada Apel.Q. Ya, beliau merupakan pengerusi panel pembangun yang terlibat ya, membidani kelahiran. Beliau merupakan pengerusi ya, panel pembangun yang membidani kelahiran DDP Apel.Q kita, dan beliau juga terlibat Apel.C seperti yang disebutkan tadi, termasuk juga ya Code of Practice for ODL ya, Code of Practice for ODL pun beliau terlibat secara langsung. Jadi melalui penglibatan di pelbagai organisasi dan bekerjasama di peringkat antarabangsa, beliau telah membina rangkaian yang luas dengan rakan dari institusi ODL di seluruh Asia ya. Misalnya beliau juga terlibat dengan Commonwealth of Learning, International Council for ODL dan juga UNESCO Bangkok ya. Beliau juga, saya bacakan, he was the Secretary General for ASEAN Association of Open Universities with 60 over members of open university or institution across the ASEAN region. His current interests and involvement include digital transformation of higher education institutions, quality assurance in online learning, accreditation of prior experiential learning, and change management. Jadi kita dapat lihatlah betapa luas cakupan pengalaman, ilmu dan juga minat beliau ya. Okey, seterusnya saya akan memperkenalkan pula Dr. Eddie Chong yang tidak kurang ya, juga kehebatan beliau di dalam bidang QA, dan kita sedia maklum bahawa Dr. Eddie Chong merupakan Chief Technical Officer QA di FAA Malaysia ya. Berkelulusan PhD daripada Universiti Multimedia Malaysia. Beliau pernah memegang jawatan Profesor dan Timbalan Naib Chancellor High Award Academic dan Pendidikan di salah sebuah institusi pendidikan tinggi di Malaysia. Beliau mempunyai pengalaman meluas ya, both external and internal aspect of QA ya, iaitu dalam pengembangan mekanisme dan sistem jaminan kualiti serta standard pembelajaran yang meliputi akreditasi institusi, program dan juga individu di FAA. Dr. Chong juga merupakan pengerusi panel kajian semula bagi standard program pengajian perniagaan bisnes ya, dan coming soon akan dilancarkanlah yang edition, yang review edition ya, dan juga berperanan sebagai anggota panel untuk lain-lain dokumen jaminan kualiti MQA seperti program standard finance ya, DGP Apel.C dan juga kajian semula dokumen audit institusi untuk akreditasi program. Beliau juga turut berpengalaman ya, seperti Dr. Andy juga, beliau berpengalaman ya, eksternal dan juga internal ya. Antaranya misalnya pada tahun 2016 beliau terlibat sebagai pengarah di INKAHI dan juga beliau juga pernah menyumbang kepada pertubuhan pendidikan sains dan kebudayaan pertubuhan bangsa-bangsa bersatu UNESCO dalam pembangunan kerangka kelayakan nasional serantau dan standard kualiti khusus dalam bidang pengajian, pendidikan dan pengurusan warisan budaya. Dan beliau juga pernah pada tahun 2017 terlibat dengan Apel.Q ya, Asia Pacific Quality Network, dan sehingga beliau baru saja dilantik ya sebagai anggota ASEAN European Expert Advisory Group dalam menyumbang kepada pembangunan kualiti pendidikan tinggi di rantau ASEAN, dan sehingga kini yang berbahagia Dr. Chong telah menerbitkan lebih daripada 145 artikel dalam jurnal, prosiding persidangan dan bab dalam buku, di mana 105 daripada makalahnya telah memperoleh lebih daripada 4,800 citasi dengan HI index sebanyak 36. Itulah merupakan sebahagian kecil daripada sumbangan besar beliau ya, Dr. Andy dan juga Dr. Eddie dalam bidang jaminan kualiti. Jadi dengan sedikit pengenalan tadi, kita dah dapat gambaran luas apakah persoalan yang bakal kita kemukakan apabila kedua panel kita berbicara soal Apel.Q the new disruptor. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa, saya dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan Prof. Madya Dr. Andy untuk membentangkan garis panduan widening access to higher education and recognizing prior learning GGP Apel.Q. Silakan Prof.
Okay, thank you so much Mr. Encik Kamaru. Just give me a second please. Encik Kamaru nampak slide saya kan?
Ya, nampak clear.
Okay, alright. Alright, good day and salam sejahtera fellow friends and colleagues from near and far. And we would agree that the geographical divide is no longer a challenge for us to be connected, especially in this new era of science and technology. And once again, terima kasih moderator Encik Kamaru yang disanjungi for your very generous introductory remarks yang telah mengusik jiwa dan sanubari saya. Sebagai pembukaan tirai, izinkan saya lafazkan serangkap pantun untuk melembutkan jiwa kita, particularly when it is so very different from the normal way of conducting webinar or seminar with participants or stakeholders from all over Malaysia. COVID gugat nadi pendidikan, musuh halimunan tapi bertaring, Apel.Q gelora baru pendidikan menembusi setiap menara gading. Now, every one of us here has our own stories to relate. And in the next 20 minutes journey or so, I will help you to connect the dots between the Apel A, meaning it is for access, C for credit transfer within the program, and Q for the Award of Academic Qualification. And the second part, we will drill down or specifically focus on Apel.Q. And this is the reason why most of us are present this morning. And the third part of this simple presentation of ours would also highlight the salient features embedded in the GGP Apel.Q. Now, for some of us here this morning, this may serve to reinforce your understanding, while others, it may be a new learning experience. So please bear with us when we run through the salient points. Now, of course, not forgetting credit goes to MQA and all the GGP Apel.Q panel members. And some of them are here with us this morning. And while Mr. Kamaru was introducing us, I saw Datuk Chiam, one of the panel members, is actually joining us here this morning. Welcome, Datuk Chiam. And we have been having sleepless nights for the past 2 years to give birth to this very important document. And this is why we are very eager to share with you the final product that will disrupt the way higher education is delivered, either within the borders of Malaysia or or globally. Now, this is the complete big family of Apel, which was actually highlighted by our moderator, Encik Kamaru. The youngest is actually Apel.A, as all of us are fully aware by now through the awareness, through the implementation process. This was actually first implemented in 2011 for the bachelor degree program. Subsequently, it was followed by Apel.C in 2016. And finally, we would probably say the mother or father to Apel is the Apel.Q. And this is the very, very reason why many of us are congregating in this virtual platform this morning. Now, Apel.Q, all of us here would agree or would concur that it will definitely make a significant impact to the human history, particularly in the higher education sector, where it is going to be very, very different from the way we deliver education through the traditional track. However, please be mindful that Apel.Q, the main target of learners are probably learners with years of experience, which means we are actually not focusing on fresh school leavers here. Now, Malaysia would be the first country in the world to introduce a national good practice guideline on Apel.Q. And this guideline is already available in the MQA website. Now, this is a very, very simple diagrammatic representation to help us to get an eagle view of what is the difference between AC or Q, or rather, how do we demarcate the difference between Apel.C and Q? Because at the end of this session or webinar today, we hope whoever that is attending this morning's session will be able to comfortably and confidently share with colleagues in their respective institution or organization when they are asked, can you briefly tell me what is the difference between AC and Q? Very simple. In a nutshell, A is actually admission, where we recognize the prior learning at the entry point. C is actually within the program of studies, where we recognize the prior learning and award the necessary credit through the credit transfer mode for X number of courses in the program. And for now, it is packed at 30% of the total credits in the program across all the various qualifications framework in the MQF. Q, on the other hand, the last column, as you can see, where the font size of the Apel.Q has been enlarged. This is actually the disruptor, where we are looking at the award of the entire academic qualifications through recognition of prior experiential learning. Now, we understand there will always be a concern whether Q would actually safeguard the integrity and credibility of the award. So for that matter, when the panel developed this Apel.Q way back in 2019 when we started, we actually look at all aspects, concerns that may be raised by stakeholders as to how do we ensure the credibility and integrity of Apel.Q will not be compromised. We will be sharing with you how do we safeguard this quality of the award shortly. Now, as we mentioned, the guidelines to good practices have been uploaded, and you can easily access this document in the MQA website under the quality assurance documents under the subheading of guidelines to good practices. Now, there are 6 major sections in this GGP, guidelines to good practices. And in the interest of time, we shall only highlight the salient points in the various sections. Particularly, we will focus more onto the area 2 and 3. Now, we shall begin by looking at the policies of Apel.Q. And this, as we understand, policies usually will serve as the guiding principles in the implementation process. Now, if we look at this particular slide, item number 1 here clearly states, Apel.Q is applicable for Malaysians and non-citizens of Malaysia, meaning international students can also apply for Apel.Q track. And the entry requirements of Apel.Q is very, very general in the sense that we are actually focusing on the number of years of working experience in the relevant field. And we will not go through in detail as to the different various levels, as you can see there, from certificate MQF level 3 to the highest level in the MQF, the doctorate level. Now, of course, it is fairly straightforward, as you can see from the screen here, but there will be some QA measures that we need to inject where the institution will ensure that the number of years of working experience in the relevant field has to be assessed right from the beginning, because we do not want to implant false hope into the learners by subjecting them to this Apel.Q track. So whoever that we are admitting must be duly informed of the expectations and also has what it takes to undergo this Apel.Q track. Now, just for the interests of those who may be new in understanding Apel.Q, Apel.Q is more of recognizing the prior learning, but the award of the qualification is still the same award approved by MQA and approved by MOHE to be conducted in the respective institution. Now, the third point here, when we talk about prior learning is always focusing on 3 major categories, regardless of whether you are looking at prior learning within the borders of Malaysia or in other countries like US or Europe. They would cluster this prior learning into 3 categories: the formal, informal, the work experience, and the non-formal, which is actually running parallel to the mainstream of higher education. The 4th policy related to Apel.Q is very interesting. All disciplines under the MQF level can follow through the Apel.Q track. However, for fully research-based program, for now, Apel.Q will not be applicable. The other point that we would like to draw your attention is, yes, we do understand there are professional programs, for example, programs that are validated or accredited not only by MQA, but perhaps by professional bodies like Engineering Council. For such program, the HEP is responsible for securing approval by the professional bodies, whereby they would actually say, yes, we do understand this modality, and we do accept this Apel.Q as one of the track in securing a academic qualification, which eventually they would then recognize through their professional exam board or council. This is what I've just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, that the Apel.Q will not be applicable for fully research-based program at the level 7 master and doctorate. And this is why it is being highlighted here. It is only for coursework and mixed mode program. The other aspect that we have to be mindful or to be aware is that whoever that is applying, whichever institutions that are applying for Apel.Q to be rolled out in their respective institutions or program, it must be from programs that have gained full accreditation status. So if a program is at the PA status, for now, they cannot apply for Apel.Q track. Now, the assessment is one of the core components, especially in running or in implementing Apel.Q, because this is going to affect the credibility and integrity of the entire chain of Apel.Q if it is not managed correctly. So over here, two very important points. When we look at the award of Apel.Q qualification or assessment, we are looking at an individual base. So in parallel to this, what we are saying is, if the institution decides, to roll out this Apel.Q as an additional option for adult learners to secure an academic qualification, then they have to seek approval for from MQA. This is very different from Apel.C, where once MQA has endorsed or granted the approval to an institution to run Apel.C, they can adopt Apel.C across all the other various programs in the faculties or departments residing in the institution. That is Apel.C. But for Apel.Q, the approval that will be granted by by MQA would be on a program base. So submission to MQA will be based on individual program as well as the approval. And the assessment instruments that the institution would have to put in place comprises these 4 major instruments. All of us are quite familiar, especially if this is not the first time you're hearing about Apel.Q, the portfolio, the field and validation visit, the challenge test, and the capstone course. Now, along our discussion this morning, you'll be hearing FVV. FVV is actually the acronym of field and validation visit. Challenge test would be, the acronym would be CT. Items number 5, we have gone through this, especially when it relates to professional programs. Now, the implementation process, in a nutshell, it covers 5 major areas. Number 1, as we mentioned, any institutions that so decide to implement Apel.Q, approval from MQA is necessary, all right? And on the aspects of learner, they have to actually apply for Apel.Q track through MQA, which means in the MQA portal under the Apel homepage. This is where learners would have to register and pick which institution or which program that they have decided to apply for Apel.Q. And this portal will actually house all the programs that are approved by MQA for Apel.Q for the various institutions in Malaysia. And the learner can actually apply through this portal anytime during the year. And this is where MQA will centrally monitor to ensure at any given time, the learner is only registered under one particular institution, because we do not want them to beat the system or abuse the system. This is why they would be centrally monitored through MQA. Now, once they have applied to MQA, then MQA will look at, but probably the first part of it is the basic requirements on the years of working experience. And once this has been approved at the point of MQA, then it will direct the applicants to the respective institutions or program that they have chosen. Now, the assessment, definitely, we have been talking about OBE, outcome-based. So this is where the portfolio, the FVV, challenge tests, and the capstone course will focus on the body of knowledge and competencies embedded in the respective program. Now, at the end of the Apel.Q, where the students travel through this whole journey of Apel.Q, they will be awarded a scroll just like any other students pursuing a conventional program, an academic transcript. And this academic transcript will outline the forms of assessment that they have undertaken, the grades, as well as the GPA and CGPA. And of course, this will be more onto looking at the grade point and the weighted average that we will share with you shortly. Now, over and above this, the Malaysian qualification statement must accompany all this document that we have stated here, the scroll and the academic transcript. Now, there is also this document in MQA website that outlines what exactly in the MQS. We won't be going through this in granular detail, but in short, it outlines the program content, the assessment, and all things related to the content of the program will be embedded in the MQS. So any employers or any higher education institution accepting them to a higher degree program would know exactly what is embedded in the Apel.Q program. Now, the last part here is the maximum duration that will be kept for completion of the Apel.Q application. So meaning at the point where they knock at the door of the higher education provider, let's say I now look at institution A and I'm coming to institution A to apply for Apel.Q at the certificate level. From this year, if I was to start in, let's say, June, that means I have 3 years from now to ensure completion of the Apel.Q program. So this is what the respective institution would have to enforce this completion time here. Now, coming back to, so that is a simple encapsulation of all the various policies where we managed to highlight to you in the past 3 slides. Now, this slide is projecting what we are looking at the 4 components of the instruments that will be adopted to assess the prior learning of the students in Apel.Q track. Now, this is where we want to stress that we have to be very, very mindful that in Apel.Q, we are looking at the experiential learning across the board. Across the board here, meaning regardless of the maximum duration of studies, we are looking at the prior learning, and the prior learning here has to be assessed through this 4 main assessment instruments. And these 4 main assessment instruments will have the same academic standards and rigor as the conventional traditional learning. So which means over here is more of looking at the prior learning, and here is actually a capstone course. And the capstone course could be a final year project in the program or a series of higher level courses where the institution or the specific program would actually indicate that these are the capstone courses in the program. So when the institution applies for Apel.Q implementation, there will be a section in the Apel.Q 01 form that will be requesting the institution to indicate what is or what are the capstone course or courses in the particular program. And we all know capstone course amalgamates the learning outcomes of the program, and it demonstrates that the learners have mastered the core disciplines of their studies. This is actually a journey of a student. What we are showing here is just that so that we are all on the same platform, how the journey of an Apel.Q learner would look like. So over here, the learners begin the Apel.Q journey when they first knock at the door of the higher education provider. It could be a walk-in or an inquiry through your homepage in the university website. So at this point, this learner could be a local or international students residing in Malaysia or abroad. So this is where the learners will be guided or will be briefed on the expectations and the requirements of Apel.Q. And this is very, very vital. This stage is very, very vital because it will help the learner to make an informed decision and have realistic expectations of the possible outcomes of the application. So once the learner has decided to move ahead in this track, this journey with the institution, then the learner would then go into the MQA portal and then register there as we mentioned just now. So once they are registered, then if it is approved, then they will be directed to the institution. And when they come back to the institution, when they return to the chosen institution, they will then be guided to undertake a self-assessment test. And this will be guided by an advisor. And if the advisor, having worked with the candidates and looking at the self-assessment of this particular learner, would then say, yes, you are eligible, you are qualified, then the learner will then formally register in the institution. And this is again where the institution has to put in place how do they manage the formal registration of this category of learners. And this is where they will begin the journey of the assessment here. Now, there have been many questions as to what is the time frame or the realistic time for each of these stages here. Now, when we work with the pilot institutions in rolling out Apel.Q, the realistic time frame when we talk about portfolio, it could be 3 months. FVV could be conducted within a month. Challenge tests could be conducted within a month. So all this thing here, the fastest possible time frame, it may be less than 6 months. But of course, in certain disciplines, certain programs, it may be over a year or so. And the capstone course is actually a course embedded in the traditional program. So it is governed by whatever requirements embedded in the proper program. So this is basically to show us some indicative time frame for the learners to go through the Apel.Q track. Now, the other thing that we would like to share with you in providing the holistic assessment of the prior learning, each instrument would carry certain weightage, as you can see here. Now, the portfolio and FEV, we know primarily it is to assess the work experience. And mostly would be tangible evidence that we are looking at, especially from the learner's perspective. And for the field and validation visit, the FEV, we have to understand this very important aspect. When you look at the guidelines, the GGP, it does mention very clearly, it is not about verifying the evidence in the portfolio, but to also assess and validate the learner has the appropriate knowledge and competencies in the said program. And the challenge test actually will assess the understanding and knowledge of the learner on the core discipline of the program. And capstone in a way would also mirror the challenge test, but it is drawing the learning from the entire curriculum. So when we move on to the capstone course, we also want to ensure that the overall prior experiential learning of the learner is of a sufficient high standard that it merits the Award of Academic Qualification. Now, let me draw your attention to these 5 items here. What is the assessment like, and how do we roll out the or specification or the criteria of the assessment? Now, all the assessment that we mentioned here, whether it is P, FEV, or challenge test or capstone, they must be focusing on assessing the program learning outcomes in the program. So when we look at A here, when an institution intends to roll out the Apel.Q for a specific program, the assessors would then have to say, or would then need to look at how would the 11 PLOs, let's say we are looking at the MQF edition 2, where the classes of learning outcomes, the 5 classes of learning outcome can be segregated into 11 domains. So within the 11 domains, you may have your 11 PLOs. So this is where we have to make sure under which instrument are we going to test the respective 11 PLOs. Would this be looking at PLO 1, 2, 3? Would this be looking at all PLOs, or would this be looking at PLO 4, 5, 6, and etc.? So the PLO must first be distributed accordingly across these 3 instruments, particularly in these in these 3 main instruments that the learner has to go through before they enter into the capstone stage. Now, we all understand that the program learning outcome statement, the statement by itself, would not actually do much justice in assessing the learners, because we know that the PLO usually would be very short or brief statement, or they are very high level and sometimes very abstract statement in nature. So as to how are we assessing this PLO, then we'll be guided by the course mapping that already exists for the particular program. For example, if we are looking at PLO 1, then there will be mapping of those courses into PLO 1. And by mapping those courses into PLO 1, we will then understand what exactly PLO 1 is looking at. So this is where we'll probably need to look at how to consolidate all these LOs of the respective courses that will well define the PLO 1 here. So this is what we are looking at briefly at item A. Now in item B, this is very simple. It is to inform us that the learners have to go through this in a sequential order, meaning before the learner can actually go into the FEV stage, they have to pass this portfolio stage. And here, when we talk about passing, we are looking at the achievement of a minimum of 50% in each PLOs tested for them to be awarded a pass status in the respective instrument. So if you're looking at 5 PLOs that are going to be tested here, that means they would have to have achieved at least 50% in each of the PLO tested. If there are 4 PLOs out of the 5 that have achieved 50%, but the final PLO here doesn't achieve 50%, it means the student actually failed at this point. So when we are looking at the receipt, we are only assessing the receipt at the PLOs that the students have failed to obtain 50%. All right. So what we would like to share here is whenever a student is subjected to go through a receipt or given the opportunity to receipt, we are giving them 3 attempts to redeem the fail status, 3 attempts. After 3 attempts, then we would then decide and inform the candidates, I'm sorry, you may need to explore other options instead of going through this track. So the reseating here is not about the unfair gaining to the students, but rather building up on the areas that they need to improve, meaning we are improving the weak point of the learners here. And again, this is all about prior learning. So when we talk about prior learning or experiential learning, it is not structured. It will take time or a longer time to acquire, right? And the last part here, CGP, as I mentioned much earlier just now, towards the beginning of the presentation, it is based on the marks, the grade point, and the weightages that we shared prior to this slide here. So it is actually on a weighted grade point where we are able to compute the GPA and the CGPA of the students. Now, in the next 3 slides or so, it will outline exactly what are the granular details in the portfolio, and we all understand the simple terminology of portfolio. It is about compilation of evidence. So when we assess the candidates, of course, assessing the candidates through a portfolio, we must have a very comprehensive rubric. And in that rubric itself, we would outline what are the criteria. If you're using specific scale, let's say from a Likert scale of 1 to 5, what are the criteria in the individual scale that you have adopted? What would be the descriptor for each scale that we are looking at? So that would be the beginning of the development of the rubric for assessing the portfolio. Now, while assessing the portfolio, the assessors would then say, based on this evidence that they have, let's say there are 20 evidence from the learners, then they would then cluster this evidence based on the scale that they award to the particular learner. So there are a whole areas or QA that we really need to look at to ensure that the portfolio assessment is a valid and reliable tool. All right. Now onto the FVV. In short, this is actually assessing the psychomotor and affective domain, which may not be covered by other instruments. And one way of identifying this is to conduct this FVV either in the workplace of the learner or location that is conducive and appropriate. So meaning there would be constant engagement between the institutions that are rolling out the Apel.Q with the organization where the employee how to say, where the employee is actually a staff of the organization. Because in order for us to enter the organization, we would have to seek approval from the employer, especially from an institution to the organization, not only through the learner. And to undertake this, the institution must have a proper assessment policy, which they will probably look at many aspects, including how do they assess and manage risk in the workplace. Now, the third instrument would be the challenge test. As we have mentioned earlier, CT, challenge test, is to assess or to test the learner's general and overall competencies from the core discipline or field of the studies embedded in the program that they are applying for Apel.Q. All right. And we all agree that one of the major stakeholders in rolling out any program or assessment instruments would be the panel of experts. And this slide actually briefly describe the distribution of the roles of these three major stakeholders, the advisors, the assessors, and moderators. We will not drill down on the granular detail here because they are all clearly stipulated or explained in the GGP. But just for the interest of some of us here, very quickly, the criteria appointment of the experts actually has to fulfill some basic criteria. And one of which should be they must be an approved and trained experts by the relevant regulatory body, which is MQA, or the institution. And they must possess vast experience in the field of studies with sufficient knowledge and content structure of the program. And of course, with the academic qualification at the level higher than the program being assessed. And having said all this, it is always stated in any circular of MQA, they would then be guided by whatever standards or program standards that are available for the specific program. Now, the criteria of award actually looks at three simple criteria. Number one, as we have been resonating or shared over and over, they have to pass every assessment instrument, the portfolio, the FEV, the challenge test, and the capstone course by achieving at least 50% score on each PLO tested for them to be awarded a pass status for the particular instrument. Then, of course, the final criteria here will be tagging along the achievement of the CGPA. And we are all very, very familiar that for an undergraduate level or below undergraduate level program, level 6, they have to achieve at least a CGPA of 2.0 and master and above a CGPA of 3.0. Now, this is a simple chart or flow chart to show the approval process that will be required in order for the respective institution to implement Apel.Q. In this flow chart, I think I will only draw your attention to the first circle here. Now, this first circle would have outlined briefly the 4 main criteria that the institution can adhere to or can be guided when applying for Apel.Q. Number 1, if you are intending to apply for an Apel.Q for a specific program, ask ourselves this, a simple checklist. Have my institution been approved to adopt Apel.C? If your answer is a yes, then you proceed to the second part. Second part is the institution stakeholders would have to attend an MQA Apel.Q workshop. So this will be arranged between the institution and MQA. Then the third checkbox would be, would the program that I intend to apply for the rollout in using the Apel.Q tool, is it a fully accredited program? If the answer is yes, then proceed to complete the Apel.Q 0 form. Now, the Apel.Q 0 form has a lot of information, right from the general information of the education provider to the implementation process, to the commitment by the institution to roll out the Apel.Q, to having pilot cases or pilot studies as to how the institution would implement Apel.Q in the specific program that they're intending to apply. So if that has been done, of course, the other things will entail, as you can see, in 2, 3, 4. All right. And I believe MQA is actually looking at opening this application for higher education providers in Malaysia to apply for the rollout of this Apel.Q in July. So Stay tuned and look out for the relevant announcement and circular later on. Now, this slide encapsulates the points we deliberated earlier on the roles of MQA and HCPs. Again, in the interest of time, we would not go into the details. Now, Apel.Q, of course, like any other instruments or tools, will require a very strong internal QA system, particularly within the HCP. And this is crucial or critical because we would want to gain or instill public confidence that the award that we are giving through the Apel.Q track carries the parity of esteem equivalent to the traditional or conventional qualification. Now, to summarize what we have been through in the past 20 minutes or so, we can cluster our thoughts through these 5 simple questions, asking ourselves, what is Apel.Q? Why are we rolling out Apel.Q? Why must I look at this option in my institution? And who would I be targeting when I roll out the Apel.Q? And how do I, as I mentioned much earlier, ensure the credibility and integrity of this Apel.Q award? And where can I or inform learners that they can apply Apel.Q for certain specific program? So with that, I'll hand over the session to my colleague Eddie, who is also a panel member in the development of GGP, and of course, as Mr. Kamaru has mentioned, you would have heard the biography of Eddie, very rich and in terms of experience, not only local but drawing the experience from the international perspective as well. So Eddie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you for your kind words. Salam sejahtera and a very good morning to Encik Kamaru Bakri. My dear pengurusi Andy, ladies and gentlemen, may you be well and continue to be well. I'm sure we are all overwhelmed to see more than 500 friends and colleagues with us here, Andy and Encik Kamaru, which is a good sign that Apel.Q is slowly gaining momentum. More and more of us are keen to know more about what Apel.Q is all about and what are the potential of Apel.Q. And of course, I joined Andy too to thank Encik Kamaru for your kind words. And I would also like to recognize Datuk Chiang, who is one of our panel members of this GGP. I hope I didn't miss out any other colleagues. What I'm going to share with you, Datuk, ladies and gentlemen, is mainly my thoughts, where they are premised upon my experience in dealing with different Apel candidates, which also included the recent pilot exercises that MQA is carrying out on some Apel.Q institutions, and as well as my perspective of the industry. So on this call, I hope to provide our friends and colleagues with a balanced view as much as possible. So let me begin with this preamble in order to set the context of our discussion this morning. When Apel for admission or Apel.A was introduced in 2011, very few people were aware of it, let alone what Apel is all about. And as we could see on this slide, there were only 9 applicants at that time, right, in 2011. These applicants are what we normally call golongan otai, or the old-timers, as they lack formal qualifications, but they have sufficient experiential learning to return to mainstream education. What was once limited to only 4 disciplines. So if I remember correctly, when Apel.A was first launched, there were only 4 disciplines that were applicable under Apel.A, which were business, performing arts, IT, and education. Apel.A is now open to many more disciplines due to the demand from learners, as well as perhaps employers and the regulators as well. So I'm sure some of our friends here would have witnessed some of the learners coming from the background of occupational safety and health, media studies, even computer science, engineering, and journalism are enrolling into your academic programs using Apel.A. And of course, in 2014, that was 3 years after the launch of Apel.A, there was a significant increase in the number of Apel.A applicants. Again, because in 2014, Apel.A was at that time open to diploma and master's level of studies as well. And of course, the participation of well-known individuals and celebrities has also contributed to the sharp increase in the participation of adult learners. So what started with only 9 applications has grown to 4,246 in 2020. And this is despite the pandemic that we started to experience last year. And I was informed that we actually reached the peak in 2019, 8 years after Apel.A was launched, where we had 5,104 Apel.A applicants. So these are the overwhelming numbers, right? And of course, when Apel.C or Apel for Award of Credit was launched in September 2016, right, we saw an increase even in more disciplines, from 23 disciplines to 44 disciplines. This included areas such as early childhood education, occupational safety and health, as I mentioned earlier, project management, psychology, culinary arts, media and design, hospitality and tourism, and even real estate. Right? And these are just few of the 44 disciplines that we are currently seeing in terms of students seeking for award of credit. And of course, the increasing popularity of Apel.A and Apel.C, right, not only demonstrated the extent of recognition by individuals and to some extent superiors and employers, right? Over and above, we are delighted to see that more and more professional bodies have since recognized Apel.A and Apel.C. As you can see on this slide, we now have in alphabetical order the Board of Engineers Malaysia, BEM, BTPM, the Board of Town Planners Malaysia, or in Bahasa Lembaga Perancang Bandar Malaysia, and MBOT, the Malaysia Board of Technologies, are now recognizing admission through Apel.A. And of course, we are also pleased to see that the Malaysian Optical Council is also applying to become an approved Apel.C center for its members, particularly the opticians who want to become optometrists after pursuing their Bachelor of Optometry through a shorter scheme of program under the Apel.C. Right. Please also allow me to share 2 examples of financial services industry, of course, where I come from, to demonstrate how Apel is being applied. So the first one is the RPL, the Recognition of Prior Experiential Learning Application Handbook for the certification programs offered by the Islamic Banking and Financial Institute of Malaysia, or in short, IFIM. IFIM has in fact made references to the GGP, MQA's GGP for Apel.A, Apel.C, and even Apel.Q for the for 4 purposes. 1 is admission to their programs, 2, credit transfer, 3, sitting for challenge examination or capstone courses only, and 4, exemption from attending classes where participants only need to sit for their professional examination. And the second one on our right is the RPL, or Recognition of Prior Learning Mechanism, established by the Malaysian Insurance Institute, or MII, and the Chartered Insurance Institute of UK, under which the participants who have completed MII's qualifications can claim credits to pursue the CII's Advanced Diploma in Insurance. It is worth noting that MII is also in the process of developing its own Apel mechanism for its in-house programs, for which it is also making a lot of references to MQA's GGP as well. So without bias or prejudice, I believe that MQA has developed, in fact, one of the best Apel mechanisms in the world, looking at how the mechanism can be applied to both academic as well as the industry perspective. And the second example here that I wish to share is on the Finance Accreditation Agencies, or FAA's recognition of learning. So as you can see here, on the three types of learning, formal, non-formal, and informal learning, FAA has obviously made extensive reference to Apel to map out the differences in terms of learning amongst the financial services industry practitioners. So as we can see on this slide, FAA accredits academic and professional qualifications. FAA also assesses individual employees with accreditation in specific job positions, and they include bank managers, compliance officers, to name some. And FAA also offers its own assessor certification program, as well as a professional learning series, such as the Train the Trainer program. So what I wish to demonstrate here is that by looking at this slide, we will see that the possibility, especially for FAA, to look at some of the financial services industry employees to pursue their studies, perhaps their bachelor's or master's degree through Apel.A, to maybe obtain credit transfer through Apel.C, or even to apply for awards of qualifications, right? There are still a number of golongan otai in the financial services industry, which are also looking for higher qualifications as a sign to recognize all the prior experiential learning that they have acquired over the years. So this would give them very much the opportunity for them to pursue their dreams, to get a qualification as a form to recognize all the prior learning that they have obtained over the last 20-25 years or so, right? Let me now move on to the second part of my presentation, right, which is on the Apel.Q itself, right? We have listened to Andy just now on the minimum number of years of experience required, right, for each qualifications level. We have also looked at the assessments that the individuals are expected to go through. And I am grateful to a number of questions that our friends and colleagues have raised in the Q&A function, which actually gave us the sign that you know, there's a number of sort of promising and exciting aspects for Apel.Q coming in the near future, and also perhaps looking at what are the critical success factors or vitamins for success, you know, that is required for Apel.Q to be recognized and for it to function as it is supposed to be. So for the start, if you remember, Dato, ladies and gentlemen, I started off by mentioning about some pilot studies that we are currently conducting with MQA. And through these pilot studies, Apel.Q is basically giving us or showing us the possibility of individuals from various backgrounds who could be potential Apel.Q candidates. And they include mainly entrepreneurs, people who have thorough understanding of how business operates, and this can also be contextualized to different fields. For instance, an entrepreneur running a tourism business, or even a kindergarten owner. Right? We are also seeing the potential in teachers, especially the early childhood teachers. We are also seeing the potential of occupational safety and health officers, and even IT and cybersecurity specialists, right? And also technical specialists in the manufacturing management environment, to name some, who are potential Apel.Q candidates, right? Many of these golongan otai or old-timers have substantive amount of experiential learning, and through Apel.Q, they can seek an avenue to recognize all the formal, non-formal, or even informal learning that they have acquired over the last 15, 20, or perhaps 25 years. And looking at the data, the limited data that we have at this point of time, we will not be surprised to see if their shelves, their uniform personnel, celebrities such as composers, musicians, singers, bank managers, insurance or takaful agents, or even financial planners approaching us in the near future. So just like Apel.A and Apel.C, Apel.Q maintains what we see here, a commonly agreed philosophy of recognizing the three types of learning: formal, informal, and non-formal learning. But again, we will have to recognize the different yardsticks that need to be used for different disciplines, because different disciplines would entail or would involve rather different body of knowledge. So because of that, there must be a proper framework in place for each institution as a guiding principle to implement Apel.Q. Right? I will explain more in a bit on why is it so important to have such a rigorous framework and mechanism in place for each of the institution, especially from the industry's perspective. And just like the conventional programs, right? Both management and assessment of Apel are credible. They are very important. They are integral parts to ensure credibility of Apel.Q. Right, and as I've mentioned earlier, these 2 points, consistency and management and assessment of Apel, are very, very critical to build trust by the industry, especially of this new invention, Apel.Q, that we are seeing now. Right. So moving on, I would anticipate strong industry support if these 6 prerequisites or critical success factors are there. Right, as we can see here, we need to have a clear and concise Apel.Q process and information. We need to focus on assessment. We need to capture and validate experiential learning through electronic record keeping. We need to take into consideration the administrative costs associated with Apel.Q implementation for both the candidates as well as ourselves as the institutions. We need to forge very, very close collaboration with regulators and industries, as well as making sure that a robust monitoring, review, and continuous quality improvement is put in place. So I will elaborate on each one of these by linking them to the perspective of the industry. So to begin with, this is the first critical success factor. Apel.Q process and information must be clear and concise. So to begin with, it is worth appreciating the fact that whilst the notion of awards of qualifications is nothing new to the skills side, right? We know that our counterpart JPK, right, has been involving in a lot of skills assessment and also in recognizing the skills of some of our learners, and to accord them with appropriate skills qualifications, whether at certificate, diploma, or advanced diploma, right? But this Apel.Q is something very, very new to the academic side, right? It is completely different from the skills side, because we are not just looking at ascertaining the skills level of someone in performing something, but we are looking more at the cognitive as well as the affective side of an individual, right? Bearing in mind that if we were to even look at the PLOs of our programs, right, they will encompass every single aspect, not just on the technical requirement of that individual learner, but also the expectations in terms of the soft skills, right, that are required by the individual to perform. So in other words, we are looking at the development of a wholesome a holistic human being. So because of that, this will involve definitely a lot of considerations to be put in place, including processes, procedures, and mechanism as well. And once those processes, procedures, and mechanisms are put in place, right? The next question is, are those information contained in those processes, procedures, and mechanisms clear? Are they concise? Right? Have we communicated those information to our own staff, our potential learners, regulators, employers, or even our industry partners? Right? Again, we must acknowledge the complicated process involved. If you can see here, it is not my intention to scare you with this chart, which gives us an overall view of how of the processes that an Apel.Q learner is supposed to go through from the beginning all the way to getting an academic qualification. But what we need to acknowledge here is the fact that it will involve very complicated processes, right? Both not just the assessment, but also the administration part of Apel.Q as well. And throughout the process, this is where it could introduce ambiguity. So because of that, I would envisage that from the perspective of the industry, that we must begin with our own colleagues in the institution. Everyone in our institution must be crystal clear of the processes and procedures before we expect other people to have the same understanding of our own processes and procedures. And equally important here is perhaps to invite employers and important groups with strong positions, such as regulators, right? We have JPA and we have the professional bodies as well, right? Of course, we do have other regulators depending on the discipline that we are offering in our respective institutions. But what is important is to invite the different stakeholders, industry, regulators alike, right? To come in to our institution as early as possible, right? So that not only they could be briefed, they could also be involved in setting some of the policies and procedures for our respective institutions. And what is important from this is that they will then have a very good understanding of the rigorous process that we have put in place. And this is perhaps one of the earliest way or a means for us to build trust and confidence in industry on Apel.Q or qualifications obtained through Apel.Q, right? It is worth noting that it is the communication that builds trust, and it is also due to trust that people communicate, right? And because of that, we see the possibility, or we see the importance even for institutions to be trained before institutions can submit applications to become Apel.Q approved centers for the programs concerned. Right. Moving on will be the next critical success factor, which is on assessment. So personally, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of focusing on assessment instruments, particularly to convince employers and regulators that we have a reliable and a valid mechanism in place to match the learning outcomes, the PLOs and perhaps CLOs, with both the technical and behavioral competencies of our learners. Right. When we talk about competencies, this is where it involves professional judgment. Right. There'll be a lot of professional judgment coming into play. Right, and more so when we are seeing a lot of subjectivity in assessments. Right, I'm sure we can start imagining now how subjective our PLO statements have been, right? And how can we make the PLO statements much more objective to reduce ambiguity and more importantly to enable them to be measured. So this is where we have the assessors coming in, as mentioned by Andy just now, we have internal and external assessors. So these assessors, they are involved in developing assessments for the learners, and this includes the answer scheme, the rubrics, and so on. So the question now is, as assessors, how can we create instruments that bring out the best and the more complete form of our learners, right? And then on that basis, determine as well what kind of evidences that can best portray an individual's experiential learning and in achieving a particular PLO or a set of PLOs, right? Andy also mentioned about moderators, right? So as moderators, how do we then moderate the instruments to ensure that they are valid, they are reliable, and of course, to also look at the marks that are assigned. Are they accurately reflecting the learner, right? And I believe this is also a concern by some of us looking at the questions you raised regarding CGPA, right? And so on, right? So we will need a very good, a very robust mechanism in terms of the development of the assessment, and then use that as a basis to rate our learners, to what extent they have achieved the requirements for all the different stages: portfolio, field and validation visit, challenge tests, capstone courses. And on that basis, right, throughout the process, we may even use assessments to determine whether we need to give more enhancement courses to our learners, right? So again, let us bear in mind that this is the most important, or perhaps it is the major determinant of the success of our Apel.Q initiative, right? And as we look into assessment, right, while our philosophy and our guiding principles remain consistent to recognize formal, non-formal, and informal learning, right, we must also acknowledge the different body of knowledge for different disciplines, right? We must bear in mind that different body of knowledge will entail perhaps different yardsticks or different approaches in the way we approach assessment. So MQA has actually came up with very good guidances, even from the MQA01 and MQA02 documents themselves, where in determining the assessment, this perhaps could help to also address some of your concerns, Dato' ladies and gentlemen, that you raised in the Q&A box, where in our determination of assessment, we should be guided by Table 1. Right? I'm sure we are all familiar with Table 1, the PO and PLO metrics. Table 2, the components of a program, where we look at the courses that are classified as compulsory, as core, as specialization, and so on. Right? This is an equally important point, because if I'm getting an MBA from an institution, right, with various elective courses, and now I am, instead of going for the conventional courses, I go for the alternative route, the Apel.Q route, and I want to apply for an MQA based on my experiential learning. So the next question people will likely ask is, to what extent my MBA gained through Apel.Q is equivalent to an MBA that someone gained through attending the conventional classes, right, where we have different components, core, specialization, and so on. So that is also one important guidance to us. And of course, the other very important guidance will be Table 4, right? So this is where we have our course information summary documented. So all these tables will eventually help us to reduce the subjectivity of our PLOs, so that we can render them measurable, right? So it is important to bear that in mind based on our pilot, the experience that we have gathered from our pilot study, right? Which actually help us a lot in determining how the PLOs can be operationalized in a way that they become measurable. Right. At the same time, as we value different and diverse learning experiences, we must also keep in mind the currency of learning. Right. For instance, if we look at IT, where the shelf life of the discipline is much more shorter than any other disciplines. Right, so this is where we will have to look into the different disciplines themselves, and as experts ourselves, there are definitely no other better experts or people who can advise us than ourselves looking into the discipline where we are experts of, right? And of course, we need to also look into the soft skills part itself, right? They will become much more granular, right? This is again another experience that we gain from the pilot study, right? They will become very granular because, you know, looking at adult learners, looking at the golongan otai, the old timers, they can tell us, they can elaborate, they can articulate what they know, they can articulate what they have possessed. But it is always challenging for them to tell us exactly, okay, this is PLO 5 communication, this is PLO 11, right? This is PLO 8, this is digital skill, this is numeracy skill. So that is where we will play a role to help the learners to see how they have actually achieved all the domains in MQF 2.0, right? So that is also one way for us to convince the individuals, and bearing in mind that these individuals are very likely people working in the industry. So they will be our ambassadors, they will be our representatives who will help us to shout out to the world, to the rest of their colleagues on Apel.Q, how rigorous the process had been, and also perhaps help us to gain more recognition from the industry. So let us bear in mind on this point as well. Right, moving on is the importance of capturing and validating experiential learning through electronic record keeping. So our experience tells us that we will likely expect lots and lots of information from the candidates, right? Imagine someone with 20 years or 25 years of experience, right? How many certificates, how many testimonies, how many correspondences, awards, even newspaper cutting and things like that, which would serve to substantiate that someone's experiential learning. All right. So the question now is, how do we document them? Right? Where do we keep them? Right? And this has to be done in accordance with our own record keeping policy. Right? Many institutions have this 7 years of record keeping policy before we dispose records. Right? And more often than not, I think many institutions are moving towards electronic record keeping because that's where it could save space. It could sort of allow us to keep more data within our system, right? And also bearing in mind that we are not just keeping the individual's information or data, we are also keeping information regarding the process, the administrative process involving involving Apel.Q matters. Right? So that is where we will need to consider having a very good electronic keeping. And this will also serve as an important piece of information for you to showcase your success stories, as well as for MQA to keep a record, right, of those information regarding the applicants. And this could well serve to promote recognition amongst the regulators and the industries. So it is good to keep in mind, right, a good record keeping process in place, which is also something that we encourage the FLC approved centers to do so as well. And of course, developing such a system would to capture rich data would entail costs, right? We understand that, right? So this must be considered at the same time as we predict in the future how many Apel.Q applicants we are likely to get, and of course, how much we want to charge on each of our Apel.Q applicants. Right, and this brings us to the next success factor, which is the administrative cost. Right, we must keep in mind that Apel.Q has a cost, not just the electronic record keeping, but also the cost of maintaining the administrative side of it. Right, we need to have an Apel.Q center we need to have a head running the center, we need to have some admin staff manning the center as well. And throughout the process of application, we also need to communicate with the faculties or the schools concerned in the appointment of advisors, assessors, moderators. There will also be field visits. There will also be involvement of external assessors or even external moderators. So in other words, there's a cost, right? There's a cost in Apel.Q. So at the same time too, we must also consider, how much fee or tuition fee that we are going to charge on the learners, right? Which could be different from the fees that we charge on our full-time students, right? And on the same score, we also need to consider if learners are willing to cover the cost themselves as tuition fees, right? Knowing that now for Malaysians, we have this 7,000 ringgit in annual tax breaks for tuition fees, right? We also need to consider the possibility if there are industries or the professional bodies, right, which are willing to absorb some fees, right, or even subsidize the fees in one way or another. So this is also one point worth looking at, which could also mean more recognition for our Apel.Q initiative. And of course, what makes Apel.Q exciting and promising and even value add here is to bring industry and regulators closer to academia. All right. I'm sure all of us will acknowledge the fact that Apel.Q is a different pathway altogether. It is a new alternative lane for golongan otai, for these old-timers, which is very different from the conventional route that we are seeing today. Right. So because of that, we need a lot of endorsements. We need to get recognition. We need to get blessings from regulators, from employers. All right. And therefore, it is important to involve them from the very beginning, right, in our processes. Seek their genuine and fruitful feedback, right? And this will definitely lead to more recognition of Apel.Q, right? Of course, it would be good if some of our candidates or learners are actually representing some of this group of people, right, within the industry, who could serve as our ambassadors to tell people good things about Apel.Q, right? And also because Apel.Q involves PLO assessment, the program learning outcomes, right? And that's where it is much more important here, to get industry input, because imagine that the input that we get even from Apel.Q could also help us to determine what are the behavioral and technical competencies that are still lacking in our conventional programs, right? So that we can also improve upon our conventional programs as well. And of course, we need to shout about Apel.Q, right? So that more and more industries and regulators will join and recognize us. And it is always good to remember this, because it is an alternative lane. Without the support from employers, industry, or even regulator, the road ahead will be very, very difficult. More so when this is one of the first novel inventions in the world that many countries are yet to test, right? So let's look at involving industry in the development and calibration of the instrument, right? Something that we as panel members, something that we as champions of Apel.Q wish to see, right? So that the instruments are much more solid, they are valid, and they are reliable, right? Look at appointing assessors and moderators from the industry, right? Especially looking at their field of expertise, right? So that, again, this could widen their understanding and acceptance of Apel.Q as well, right? And a related point here is how do we document our processes and procedures relating to monitoring, review, and CQI of Apel.Q implementation, right? And this is useful not just to serve as a self-reflective purpose, but it also enables us to see the reality versus what we used to perceive about Apel.Q, about learners, and about the process, right? And of course, much of these insights could be obtained from the industry, right, as well as from the regulators, again, to gain their trust and also to gain their buy-in, right? If I could be, if I could be straightforward a bit, we know that as institutions, we all defend our system to the core, right? As MQA also makes sure that the institutions have robust system in place while allowing flexibility in the operations. But let us also not discount the fact that employers can help us to defend Apel.Q system from become paper mill. Right? This is important as we showcase this invention to the world, that Malaysia has a very successful Apel.Q system in place, a system which paper mills can be avoided at all costs. And also, the other important point is the fact that the industry can also serve as our self-correcting stakeholders. So before things go wrong, right, they could come in at any point to tell us or to give us the red flag, right, that certain things are not going right and therefore steer us back to the right direction, right? So this is also another important point which I personally see the involvement of the industry, right? And to end my presentation, right, what we want to see, as panel members as well as a champion of Apel.Q, right, is to see that Apel.Q remains as an alternative but genuine lane, right? Alternative but a genuine lane, which has its own gates to cross. But having said so, with a robust, valid mechanism in place. So if everything goes smooth, right, we can foresee that Apel.Q can be a very powerful tool to the employers, right, especially when they carry out assessment on their employees, looking at their career planning opportunities, right, and where the employees themselves can use Apel.Q to chart their future, right, especially as far as their careers are concerned, right, and more importantly, it also motivates the employees to continue learning, right, realizing that their formal, non-formal, and informal learning will continue to be valuable, right? To institutions, to all of us here, ladies and gentlemen, right? As I've mentioned before, Apel.Q opens up the possibility of bringing industry into academia. And this is where it will allow us to enrich our curriculum, teaching and learning approaches, as well as our assessment methods, right? So this is especially true, right, for those of us who will later on serve as advisors, assessors, or even moderators to the different Apel.Q applicants, right? To organizations, to the industry, right? Because employers, benefit from Apel.Q. So this is where we should involve employers as much as possible in our Apel.Q processes, right? And to the country, of course, to our beloved country, it helps us to promote lifelong learning, improve the skills development of our workforce, and also contribute to the increased productivity and competitiveness of our country on the regional as well as on a global scale. So with this, it is our fervent hope to see that more industries, more professional bodies, and more institutions will join the fray. Right? I am optimistic, as well as my colleagues in MQA, as well as our colleagues on the panel, right, that Apel.Q will be something that the world will look up upon. Our own experts, our own learners will look up upon, right? Something that will help to propel Malaysia to be a country with the culture of lifelong learning, right? And so thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. Now I will hand the session back to Encik Kamaro Bakri. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Eddie, dan juga thank you, Prof. Andy. Basically, kita dah dapat gambaran yang luas ya tentang Prof. Andy dah explain tentang DGP Apel.Q, policy and procedures, dan manakala implementation dia dari segi industries dah diterangkan oleh Dr. Eddie. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa, sebab kita ada 15 minit sahaja masa untuk kita menjawab persoalan-persoalan yang ada. Jadi kita minta Rustia terus paparkan soalan, dan untuk menjimatkan masa, kalau soalan itu hanya perlu jawab yes no, kita jawab yes no saja. Kalau perlu explanation pun kita akan bagi minimum explanation sajalah, supaya kita dapat pergi banyak soalannya. So kita akan mula dengan soalan mana ya? I just buka Q&A. Boleh? Okey, I try buka ni lah. Kalau base kepada senarai soalan, dan kita akan maklumkanlah kalau Marian dah jawab tu, panel just maklumlah jawab lah. I try untuk soalan yang pertama ni. I would like to ask about the doctoral level. Does a successful applicant for Apel.Q doctoral can apply a job as a lecturer that require minimum qualification of PhD or doctoral under Apel.Q about the title only? So Prof. Andy boleh terus jawab?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Kamarul, and of course, Eddie, for sharing the perspective from the industries. I think what you have stated in your slides are really relevant and critical to ensure the success or the adoption of this by the industries. Now, in fact, Mr. Kamaro, when Eddie was presenting, I've actually run through all the questions, and also have seen the answers provided by Eddie and MQA, your good self, in the chat group as well. So basically, maybe we round up this whole Q&A by looking at, I think there are 10 categories that I have actually summarized based on the various questions raised, because I fear we may not have ample time to address all the questions, but whatever it is, we'll try to cluster these questions based on these 10 categories and answer to the best of what we can for now, and we'll be providing more clarity in the FAQ later that will be uploaded onto the MQA website along with the GGP, which means wherever you see where the location the GGP resides is where you will find the FAQ tag along it. So the first thing here is on the recognition of this award. Now, we understand it has always been a concern of many, whether it is local or international students, whether at the end of the day, the award that I'm getting would be recognized by my employers either within Malaysia or, as I mentioned just now, by the institutions that I'm intending to pursue higher education. For example, I'm looking at Apel.Q at the certificate level, and I've been awarded this so-called qualification. Now, as we mentioned just now, the qualification will still be the same name and award based on nomenclature of the conventional program or program that has been approved by MQA. It's only the delivery mode. So within the borders of Malaysia, I would think, or I would be very confident to state that most of the HEPs, higher education providers, and the employers would actually recognize this form of award. However, we will always have this caveat: if the person is going overseas, it is always good to check with the institution overseas whether do they recognize an award that evaluates the prior learning. My answer would be higher percentage, or the likelihood would be very high, because in most countries now, they do have what they call RPL. They do have what they call prior learning PL as well. So, which means they also are moving towards this arena where prior learning constitutes the learning. But of course, again, this is actually more for adult learners. So this is what we can actually mention on the qualification awarded. This is one part of it, and the other one, Eddie, please chip in as and when you you would think is necessary to offer more clarity, or Datuk Chiam or Kamaru. The other one is the entry requirements. As you mentioned just now, the entry requirements are actually tagged on the years of working experience, and these are all relevant working experience. It could be consecutive years, or it could be a cumulative number of years over 30 or 40 years that the institution will look at. Which are the years that are related to the program that a person is pursuing. There's this couple of questions that we see appearing over and over in the Q&A chat, is that if I have completed, let's say, my diploma or my certificate, and I intend to do Apel.Q at the master level, can I use the diploma qualification as one of the evidence of learning? The answer is a big yes for that, because right from the beginning we mentioned the Apel.Q recognizes the formal learning, and the formal learning is actually learning that constitutes to the award of an academic qualification, other than the informal and non-formal. And the duration of the program, remember there was one slide, I can't specifically remember which one, but we did discuss that if you're looking at the 4 instruments, the portfolio, FVV, and challenge tests, if the institution has all the resources and capabilities, they can actually roll it out within 6 months. All right. And we also caution the institution, whatever that we are doing, ensure we do not compromise on the quality, or ensure we safeguard the credibility and integrity of the instruments that you're using. So it could be resources in terms of human resources, the stakeholders, various stakeholders that are involved, the systems that you're adopting, the policies that you have approved, the body that are involved in the decision making. It could be Senate, it could be academic body, it could be a faculty board, and etc. So the duration here is the duration of the first 3 instruments. And we mentioned at the capstone level, it is actually the courses that you have identified in the program that will serve as a capstone. And as mentioned by Eddie and myself, I think we did resonate a couple of times that the capstone course or courses that amalgamates all the learning within the curriculum. That means they are drawing down all the skills and competencies that are required in the program. That means consolidate into one, and most of it would be something like a final year project would be your capstone. Some would be your dissertation or thesis in a mixed program. Some programs you may not have this, but you may have industrial training, internship, and etc. So now the question is, if I have internship and practical training, so how do I deal with it? Our simple proposal to you is write in to change your program structure, or to supplement your program structure, saying for category of learners in this prior learning, we are looking at another option. Instead of offering internship or practicum, you may be looking at a project, you may be looking at a thesis or dissertation. So that part of the capstone will be governed by the conventional track of your program. If it's a 1 semester, that means the person would have to fulfill at least 1 semester of studies. So this is how we look at the minimum duration of the program. Yes, we did state the maximum duration, and this is how you look at the minimum duration. This is why in the GGP, we did not state the minimum duration, because it's governed by individual program standards, particularly at the capstone level. All right, but we can share with you during the pilot studies in the various institutions, they were able to complete all these 3 stages within 4 to 5 months. But this is actually very, very rushed. That means they have to mobilize all resources. I think for institution to comfortably roll out all these 3, probably look at a 1 year period. All right, so that it doesn't overstretch the capability of whatever resources that we have in the institution. All right, once again, it is always about whether I can mobilize the resources that I have, whether I have adequate resources. So we talk about the recognition of the award, we talk about entry requirements, we talk about duration, and we talk about what is a capstone course. And also there is another part on the computation of GPA and CGPA. Now, as we understand, when we talk about challenge test, portfolio, or FEV, they are not bound by credit. In the conventional track, we are always governed by this student learning time, right? 1 credit is equivalent to 40 notional learning hours. Here, we are not bound by this. As I mentioned just now, it is actually calculated based on the marks we award and tack it to the grade point of that particular marks and compute it against the weighted the weightages that we have allocated. And I think we will be sharing with you how to do a simple calculation in terms of drawing down the GPA or CGPA from this 3 category of assessment. Of course, in your capstone course, in our capstone courses, since it is embedded in the traditional program, then you would have a way of calculating those capstone costs. All right. So then we also see, we empathize with you. There are some of you who actually raise or share your grievances or challenges that you have with some programs or some professional bodies. Now that one will probably urge you to write to MQA personally from your institution and alert MQA, and from there we'll take it on from there, because it is difficult to arrest your grievances from this platform. We feel you, we feel for whatever hardships that you're going, but rest assured, I think if you channel this to MQA, they will be looking at this as soon as possible. All right. Then again, in the acceptance recognition part, we all understand when we started rolling out Malaysia, rolling out the Apel.A implementation, certain institutions were not very keen. They were not very keen in the sense that they don't welcome this. They doubt the whole chain process of Apel.A. But eventually, over time, many institutions and even professional bodies are seeing the beauty of this Apel.A and how institutions have actually protect or safeguard the quality of this Apel.A, and we are seeing more and more professional bodies stepping into this territory and accepting the entrance of students through Apel.A. Like for example, the MBOD, the township planning, and a few others like ECCE, the Optical Council, and many more that will be coming on board. All right. And this is how I think what is important is that we have to create awareness. We have to instill confidence in these people that, as Eddie said, we do not want to be seen as a paper mill entity that generates very poor quality graduates. And as we mentioned here, the graduates that we are generating here will be graduates that have X number of years of working experience, all right? And when we talk about X number of years of working experience, we do not only look at their prior learning, we will be subjecting them to a series of assessments to ensure they actually fulfill the learning outcomes of the program. It's just that we are using a different mechanism instead of subjecting them to the 3 years bachelor degree program, because in adult learner, they would have the prior knowledge. It's just that sometimes they connect, there is no specific theory that they can actually link to if you were to able to engage with some of the learners. For international students, yes, I see your concern that you raised, that how do we validate those prior experiential learning of the students. And this is where we mention very clearly, when we appoint assessors, we need one internal and one external assessor. So this external assessor, if you're talking about a student from abroad, from a country A, the assessors can be appointed from country A. I'm sure you have colleagues, you have partner institutions in specific country that you can engage and work closely with them to see how they can actually help in assessment of these students at the local level. So this is one way we could validate or verify the prior learning of the students overseas if we need to have somebody on site there. All right. Then again, many questions were asked. If we would like to apply for Apel.Q, what would be the conditions? Now, we deliberated this very extensively, not among the panel members, but also among the various stakeholders, the industry, the professional bodies, the higher education providers, as well as MHE and the MQA council members. We decided in the end, for now, it could evolve eventually, depending on the progress of this Apel.Q. Institutions that would like to apply for Apel.Q must at least be an approved institution to adopt Apel.C. Because we realize when we approve institution at the Apel.C level, the understanding of the whole works of prior learning is very, very crucial. Because if the person doesn't have a clear understanding of how the prior learning constitutes to a particular development of knowledge or competency, the assessment that a person develops or draft or use or adopted to measure the learning outcome or the course at the Apel.C level would not be appropriate. They may be using the same yardstick that you use for conventional learners, which doesn't, or rather may not be appropriate for adult learners. So if they're able to gather those preliminary experience, for them to successfully roll out the Apel.Q, it would be a lesser challenge for this institution. All right. So and this is why we take it on to the Apel.C. Then onto the assessment part, there is one question also appearing a couple of times. When we assess students based on PLOs, you have portfolio, FVV, and challenge test. Now, before they actually complete this 3 journey and migrate into the proper capstone course, yes, all the 11 PLOs in the program must be tested. So this is where we spoke about this aspect where we did highlight when we assess these PLOs, the assessor would determine in these 3 modes or instruments of assessment or assessment instruments, how would I segregate these 11 PLOs? Would it be PLO 1, 2 in portfolio, or all PLOs in one portfolio and repeated assessment of another PLO in the other 2 mode of assessment? So the assessor would have to do due diligence in segregating those PLOs into different instruments. And of course, there will be some standard or framework the institution would adopt, saying for this set of PLOs, it will probably be appropriate if we test it under FVV. All right. So those are the major aspects on the questions raised. Recognition of the qualification awarded, entry requirements, the duration of the capstone, or what exactly constitutes a capstone. On the assessment part would be the distribution of the PLOs, how do we compute the GPA and CGPA, and on the admission part, which is linked to the entry requirements, how do we manage this? How do we ensure international students are properly guided or assessed. So I think those are the 10 major areas that we managed to draw down from the many questions that you have raised. And of course, not only in this platform, you can continue to raise any questions or chat with us through MQA. What are the things that you need clarification? We'll be more than happy to assess, because this is actually a new learning experience for all majority of IPT or HEPs out there. So Eddie, Kamaru, anything to add on? Please feel free. Datuk Chiam, you're here. Please feel free to add in as well. Or Faharna.
Dah Teddy lah, kalau last word kalau ada mana-mana ada yang belum cover lagi, I tengok komprehensif dah yang Dr. Andy bagi. Tapi kalau boleh Dr. Eddie, sebab banyak I tengok Dr. Eddie jawab soalan, kalau dalam seminit 2 lagi boleh tambah. Last lah.
Ya, saya dah tak ada apa-apa dah Cik Kamaru. Saya rasa banyak pun dah diliputi. Kalau Datuk Chiam ada apa-apa nak tambah ke Datuk?
I think you all have answered most of the question, but I just want to reinforce, I think what Eddie has mentioned, that it is very important that all the 11 PLO are tested, that they are assessed, but they need not, what is very important is that in each of this, you may be able to test all the 11, but not necessary. But I think that is what some of them may not think, that they only choose. No, they may choose that they only choose in certain category. No, I think if the portfolio can assess all, yes, but what is important, that must ensure that all the 11 PLO are being assessed. I think that is the thing that we want to emphasize, that and some of these, like in certain of this assessment, the certain PLO may not be able to be tested, but we must make sure. But it doesn't rule out the fact that that portfolio cannot test all the PLO. It can. I just so that we don't have the mistaken idea that they have just that only this portfolio test this PLO, FBB test this PLO, and so forth.
Okay, thank you Datuk Chiam, one of our panel members yang bangunkan DDP Apel.Q. So masa pun dah 12:08. Saya rasa tiba masalah untuk kita mengakhiri sesi ini dan kita mengucapkan, nak pick ya. Ya, urus dia, boleh uruskan untuk kita tangkap gambar sebelum kita mengundur diri, dan pihak MKA mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada, ada tadi at one time kita ada 506 peserta ya. Jadi kita capailah 500 lebih, dan kita tunggulah urus dia untuk tangkap gambar sebelum kita mengakhiri sesi ini. Dan terima kasih kepada semua pihak yang sama-sama menyumbang dalam pembangunan garis panduan ini, dan juga para peserta yang hadir pada hari ini. Diharapkan kita di lain masa kita akan berjumpa lagi untuk sesi-sesi berikutnya bersama panel expert daripada pihak MKA. Sekian, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, dan salam sejahtera. Terima kasih.
Yeah, look at the camera. Kalau boleh on the video mode.
Participant memang tak nampak.
Tak nampak.
Tak boleh keluar gambar.
Oh, okay.
You cannot take the gambar already.
Farhana pun tak nampak. Okay.
Okay, done.
Okay, masih. Thank you everybody. Thank you. Stay safe everyone.
Bye.
I hope all of you have got your slot for the vaccination.
Thank you, Dr. Andy. Thank you, Dato.
Thank you, Dato.
Kamaro.
Both
Thank
of
you,
you.
Pak Hana.
Thank you,
Very
everyone.
interesting.
Yeah.
I like your Andy, I like your emphasis that we have to involve the industry. I think this when you come to MQ Apel.Q, I think the industry is should be involved.
Hmm.
I like that part very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dato. Thank you for your kind words.
Oh no, kind word. I'm just telling the truth.
And of course, we thank MQA and we thank all participants
Yeah.
who have joined us today. It shows how receptive they are towards not just towards Apel.Q but also helping MQA and Malaysia to to promote the culture of lifelong learning, which is something that all of us should be very, very proud of.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.